Black Women in American History by Sidney Hughes-Jackson. Unapologetically Black. The phrase unapologetically Black is one idea that stood out to me not only during this specific module, but the course as a whole. While it is a phrase that I've heard many times before as a Black woman myself, I don't think I actually understood the true definition of the phrase until listening to Charlene Carruthers speak about it. She says, as a Black radical feminist, as a Black radical LGBTQ folk, that we actually can take up space. We actually have expertise and we actually have strategic leadership that is valuable and necessary for collective liberation. This quote from her interview on Democracy Now! Made me think about how women, and in this case, Black women specifically, are often silenced in spaces, educational, professional, political, or otherwise. There have been many times when myself or other Black women I know have been silenced into thinking that what we have to say isn't important or won't add to the conversation at hand. But this phrase, an idea of being unapologetically Black, of taking up the spaces we deserve, of adding our ideas, expertise, and experiences into the equation will result in the problems being solved, concepts formed, and the world changed for the better. Black women and their ideas. Of the many ideas we have learned about during this course that have come from Black women, the three that I would like to introduce to others are intersectionality, ladder justice, and anti-Black gendered violence. Intersectionality, though an idea that I knew of before this class, is a concept that I believe will need to be taught continuously, as there continues to be an inequality in society based on any multitude of identities and their combinations, for example, race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and sexuality. Intersectionality can be used to dissect how combinations of one's identities can and possibly are being used against them in terms of inequalities. Ladder justice is a phrase I personally gave the concept opposing trickle-down justice, as mentioned by Alicia Garza during the conjoined TED Talk with Patrisse Cullors and Opal Tometi as the founders of Black Lives Matter. Alicia Garza mentions how, when addressing problems, we often seek a solution while assessing the problem in a trickle-down justice approach. Meaning, rather than looking at the root of the problem, we tend to look at the control in the majority of cases regarding race. The control would be white people. The idea that if things are better for white people, then they are better for everyone. She goes on to explain why trickle-down justice doesn't work and also uses the pay gap as an example of trickle-down justice. The concept of trickle-down justice is what allows people who are part of that control group to deny the continued existence of injustices to groups that fall underneath them. And that denial of the remaining problem by a control group that is often the majority and holds the majority of political power results in no solutions being brought about, since to them the issue no longer exists. By addressing the root of the problem and using a ladder justice approach, we are able to address the group that is most affected by any given problem. And by fixing the problem for that group, the groups above will also no longer face the problem. And using the example given by Alicia Garza, when the wage gap is often addressed, the gap is often represented as 78 cents to the man's dollar. This is a comparison of wages between white women and white men. However, BIWOC, or Black, Indigenous women of color, make even less than that, 78 cents to the white man's dollar. With Black women making 64 cents to the white woman's 78 and the white man's dollar, Latina women making 58 cents, and Indigenous women making even less than that. By addressing the pay gap between white men and women first, there is no guarantee that the wage gap between BIWOC women and white men would also change, especially when BIWOC women aren't even making the same as one another, let alone their fellow white workers. Anti-Black gendered violence is something that wasn't taught during this module, but is a concept that was covered during this course that I believe should be continued to be taught to those outside of the course as well. It is a concept I would like to share with those around me. Centralizing Black women. In order for ideas, histories, and activism of Black women to be centralized into education, society would need to end anti-Black gendered racism. Alicia Garza says, in order for Black women to be free, we have to dismantle all structures of oppression. And by dismantling all structures of oppression, not only will Black women benefit, but all people will benefit. Anti-Black gendered racism is what keeps the ideas and concepts and activism of Black women from being addressed in the classrooms, let alone centralized. It is also what keeps Black feminine presenting people from holding political positions of power. For example, during Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown's confirmation hearing and interviews and questioning leading up to the confirmation hearing, she was constantly talked down upon and her qualifications ignored, on top of the fact that she was the first Black woman to be nominated and confirmed. Thank you.